Hi, my name is Mark Holthe. I'm a Canadian immigration lawyer, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to draft employer reference letters that work. So, you think you're going to apply through Express Entry? You're excited about this July announcement that the rounds of invitations are going to open up for you federal skilled worker applicants as well as the Canadian Experience class? Well, if there's one part of that whole Express Entry process that's going to cause you more problems than any other, it's those dreaded reference letters. They can be a royal pain. And immigration, with this whole Express Entry regime and their one-touch policy, they make it extremely difficult, because if you get those reference letters even off by just a slight fraction, and let's face it, not all reference letters are created equal, it could result in your application getting rejected. So you cannot take the chance. But fortunately, you're here, and in this video, I'm going to show you what to do. But first, I want to tell you a little story. I think some of you know that I grew up on a farm, and as farms go, there comes times when you have to go into town to get supplies. Our little town was called Carmangane. It was 23 miles from our home. My dad would send us in to get farm supplies, and sometimes we would get there and we would forget the money. Well, fortunately for us, my dad had a good name with the whites, and we had a tab there. It's kind of like credit, but not really having credit. Anyways, when we would forget the money, we'd just tell Mr. White, hey, we need this, this, this. He'd say, all right, Mark, sounds good. And I said, my dad will be in to pay for it the next time he's in town. No problem, Mark. No problem at all. And that was how it was done. In those days, our word was our bond. Flash forward to today, that's not the case. So no matter how much you believe that you've performed a duty that you've performed, immigration is never going to accept your word alone for it. In fact, what they're going to be expecting is for you to prove your skilled work history. And one of the components that is essential in you proving your work history is those reference letters. So when words are no longer our bonds, we have to rely on physical evidence, and that's the reference letters. So sometimes I wish that it wasn't the case. Heck, when you submit your Express Entry application, you're certifying that everything is true, complete, and correct in the application. Shouldn't that be enough? Nope, it's not. So let's dive in and let's just take a look at what reference letters really are supposed to look at. Well, if you think about it, IRCC does do a pretty good job at laying out what is required and the essential components. So what I want to do here is basically touch on each of those and drill into you once again that you must not forget to include anything in there. Now, for those of you who are struggling with an employer, maybe that isn't cooperative, that has, well, a generic reference letter that they give all of their applicants and will not budge from it, that can be problematic. And that's why we have consults in our firm, so that we can work through those other options that might be available if you can't get a perfect reference letter. But we're not even going to talk about that now. We're focusing now on what you need to do to perfect that reference letter so you no longer have a problem with immigration. Okay, number one, you need to make sure that the letter is printed on the company's letterhead and that it has the address and contact information, the email, etc., of the supervisor that is, well, supervising your work. It needs to have your full name, and that name should match up with the name that's on the passport. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to include your middle name, but it does need to be easy for the officer to see that the reference letter relates to you. Next, like I said, company contact information. So it needs to have full address. It needs to have telephone, email, website. What if your company doesn't have a website? Well, we cover those kinds of things in the Express Entry course, which starts in June. And I drill down into a lot of these things at a far deeper level. But today we're hitting the high points. Sometimes companies will have a seal or stamp, and it's not critical that a person has that. And it's also not critical that the person uploads a business card. Although in the past, I did routinely advise my clients to do that in the early days of Express Entry, but now not as critical. But the person signing the letter needs to exist. They need to be available in case immigration does decide to reach out to them. So company letterhead, address and contact information of the company and the person signing the letter. And that person who's signing it should be an immediate supervisor or personnel officer, someone who has knowledge of you and the fact that you work for the company and perform those duties. All right, now we get down into the nitty-gritty. What specifically goes into the content of your reference letter. And remember, this is mandatory. So if you don't have these, you are opening up the possibility that an immigration officer could choose to reject your work history. And if your work history goes bye-bye, so does your express entry application. Number 1, your title. Is the title determinant of everything else? No. And if you go back and watch the video that I did on choosing your correct NOC, it's the starting point. What's essential is that the duties and responsibilities that are also listed in this letter match up with a substantial number of those main duties contained in the NOC that you've chosen. So, job title, if you want to put the NOC in for that title, you can. And remember, sometimes employers will ask you for a little bit of guidance in how to structure it, but whether they do it or whether you put the initial draft together for them to confirm and verify 100% that yes, you did it, at the end of the day, you need to make sure that everybody's on board. Everybody knows that the duties in that letter are what you actually performed. You never want to just do the letter and then give it to the employer, have them sign off, and they have no knowledge of what goes in there. Make sure that the employer is aware, and hopefully you have some input into it as well to make sure that it's correct. Job title, duties and responsibilities, job status. What does that mean? Well, are you still working for the company? If that's the case, then they need to indicate that. Was it previous work history that you're claiming? Then there should be a start date and an end date. So that's kind of what job status has. And then, of course, dates you worked for the company. So you need to clearly set it out. And I wouldn't go just with a month. Even though Express Entry only asks for the month, I always have the exact start date and exact end date. Number of hours worked per week, that's often omitted from letters. But it's critical because that's how they determine whether or not you were full-time or part-time. Next, annual salary. Well, that's what it says. Is putting hourly salary down enough? Maybe, but the guide and the directions that immigration gives specifically says salary. So I put down the annual salary and benefits if they're available. So let's be honest, right? No reference letter. Well, let me just put it this way. You can have a reference letter that's perfect, and that's what you're striving for. If you can't quite get it perfect, then there are things that you can do to try to bolster it. And those are some of the things that I cover in the course. Let's say if you can't get the employer to put your salary on there, well, what can you include? By example, do you have pay slips, pay stubs? Do you have bank statements showing the money deposited into your account with the name of the company listed? There's a number of things that you can do. And each of these elements that I've talked about today are pretty much essential. If you can't get them in the letter, then you need to figure out another way to demonstrate them to the officer. And remember, the officer is not like Mr. White with the hardware store. He's not just going to accept what you've listed. All right. That's it for today, guys. And make sure you click on the description below. You can access the course right now as of June the 1st. It is going live, all designed to prepare you to be ready when those rounds of invitations start in July. And don't forget, every single course that is out there will connect with a corresponding masterclass. And the masterclass for this will be at the end of June to give you guys time to go through, review the material. And then come the end of June, there's going to be 4 hours of masterclass with me, live Q&As where you can ask me anything. And it's devoted just for the people that have subscribed for the June cohort. All right, guys, thanks so much. And we'll see you again soon. Good luck with your Express Entry crazy journey.